Thank you, Madam President. I want to say that it's a difficult thing to speak about anything in reference to this tragedy. I think that our language is inadequate to the pain that we know was suffered, especially by the parents involved, by the relatives of the children and the teachers who were involved in it, by the responders, by the people who felt the pain. You yourself, Madam President, and the governor, who were very much on the scene throughout it. We only have the language that we have ourselves to speak with, and that's the best we can do. I think that it's a tragedy that made me think back to other experiences I've had in my life that I think we all shared. I'd go back so far beyond most of you here in this circle or most of you in this room, back to the moment I remember in second grade when I heard that President Kennedy had been shot, something that I'll never forget. One of those experiences where I can see where I was sitting and who was standing where and how we were told about it. And over the years, other such events that sometimes I think are what makes old men and women of us, the emotion that we go through and what it takes out of us. So my apologies for not having words commensurate to address such a situation. I'm also going to, in the course of what I have to say, use a few analogies, and I feel like analogies are always dangerous things because they're inherently imperfect, illuminating as far as it goes, but I think they can tend to be reductive of the situation, and I certainly don't mean to do that. But I want to express myself as clearly as I can and speak my mind on this, and not at great length. I've kind of taken an oath to myself not to impede unnecessarily the business of this chamber. I'd like to use my words as much as possible to illuminate, if nothing else, my own perspective, but not to be a barrier to finishing the work that needs to be done here. Let me say it's a strange thing in my own mind that I've become so involved and so committed on this issue. I'm not a gun owner. I was not raised in that culture. I think I probably, as a young person, shared some of the doubts about the reasons that somebody would be interested in those activities in hunting, so forth. I had a period of my life when I had the experience of living with a number of young men from out west who came from a very different part of the world and who had a very different background, and who became very good friends of mine, who I had affection and respect for. And it was at that time that I realized that my own perspective on these things was not the only perspective that existed, but that one is accustomed to what you grow up with. It seems right and it seems natural. And it made me, let's say, neutral on the subject in a certain way, neither drawn to or interested particularly in guns, but appreciating the fact that others were drawn to them. And it's perhaps was an important lesson for me to learn at that point in my life, because I've seen that in many other ways and many other things since then. I guess the question when you look at a gun is, to some extent, what do you see? Do you see something which is a tool, a mechanical object, designed, whether it's for shooting a target, shooting an animal, for self-defense, whatever it is, but a neutral object in the way that most mechanical objects we deal with in this world are? Or do we see something which is essentially, inherently a bad thing, an evil? And I would say if a gun is a tool like other guns, if it's something like other things, like other mechanical objects, it's reasonable to expect restrictions on its safety like we would with anything else, like we do with cars, for instance, to say they have to be operated safely, there has to be a reasonable amount of regulation, and so forth. And if there are problems with them that can be addressed by putting restrictions on them, we might consider those restrictions, leaving aside the question of whether guns, for other reasons, are privileged. If you see a gun inherently as an evil thing, then I think it's a natural thing to want to restrict it to the point of extinction. And I think that's the basic division in this chamber. And again, I don't say this to put words in anyone's mouth, and forgive me if I do that, but I think that there's an outlook towards guns which naturally lends one to want to restrict it as much as possible. I may use the analogy in discussing this a few months ago to alcohol. I think that alcohol is perhaps as much an evil in a way as anything that we have in common circulation. I say that as one who has tasted and enjoyed that evil myself. But it is what I tell my young nephews, it's a vice, and a vice to my mind is something that you always want to be trying to do less of and not more of, that you want to be consciously aware of. But I think alcohol has done, I've seen in my own life more damage than maybe any other thing else that I've seen. And I think something that kills more people a year than almost anything else. It was recognized, a movement emerged in this country 150 years ago, 140 years ago, to get alcohol out of our society. I think a reasonable position in many ways. And by political process and political pressure, it triumphed finally. And the decision was made to eliminate it entirely. That, to my mind, is a reasonable position if you see something as an inherent evil, which is to get rid of it, to say no more of it. The trouble in that case was it couldn't be done. And I would say the trouble in this case is it can't be done either, whatever you might think of the wisdom of it. What I think we have with guns is an attempt to identify some of them as particularly bad as opposed to others, as if we were to say we have an alcohol problem, we have a drinking problem, so we're going to ban not even hard liquor, let's say, but mixed drinks that are served in cocktail glasses. We'll ban Manhattans, we'll ban martinis. Well, if you think there's a drinking problem, that might have some very small effect, but it doesn't get at it because essentially the danger is still there. I feel that we're doing a very similar thing when we talk about what we call assault weapons. Every gun is an assault weapon if it is used with the intent to commit an assault. And to try to pick out certain guns and say, this is the problem, I think is intellectually dishonest in the sense that we're not really addressing what the problem is, nor are we really being honest about what we're trying to accomplish. I think that the characteristics by which we define an assault weapon are in fact largely cosmetic. We were sitting in the caucus on Monday looking at pictures of different guns which would or would not be prohibited. If we wanted to talk about what makes the guns dangerous, I think we'd talk about what's brought to my attention many times by people who are in favor of gun control, which is the rate of fire of the guns. But the fact is, all these guns fire fast. With a semi-automatic gun, and almost all the guns that are manufactured and bought now in our society are semi-automatic. The limiting factor on the rate of fire is not the gun, it's the finger on the trigger. And one bullet is going to come out every time that trigger is squeezed. And really, the only thing to control that finger is the mind of the person that's holding the weapon or the potential weapon. And the soul of the person that holds that weapon. There's something wrong in our society that events take place like what happened in Newtown that can't be credited to any inanimate object. They are the result of a kind of a derangement that I think is beyond our understanding. The idea that a young man could, whatever he might have fantasized about or imagined, that he could actually walk into a classroom and look at those young children and do what he did is is something that, to my mind, is closer to a kind of a possession. And I don't believe that as legislators we can do very much to address that. I think that it behooves us to look at it in the broadest sense that we possibly can, and not in the narrowest sense. And I think the broadest sense is a lack of humanity that has occurred between people, in part because of the way that we relate to each other and that we communicate with each other. I feel like there's a dissociation that I've witnessed increase in my own lifetime. We might say, what is the harm of attempting to limit the kind of guns that are available? I'd say that at the point that we recognize that that is not the solution to the problem, and that the discrimination between guns is not going to make this world a safer place, I think then we face the problem that we have people who have a deep interest in this, just as they might have an interest in anything else, and that's something you can only understand by knowing the people involved. Law-abiding, and in many ways could not be more law-abiding. Pillars of the society, frequently veterans, frequently law enforcement officers, who have not done anything to threaten or to destroy life in this society, who find that their pastime, their interest, is going to be demonized, and they themselves brought under suspicion and made to be in a criminal position to suit what I would only say is an obscure agenda. And if they feel that what is going on moves in the direction of confiscation, I think they are entitled, I think they're right to feel that way, because I see no sense that there is an end to what those who are suspicious of guns would ask for to try to make the society safer. We've heard today, and I think it's an honest response, I don't mean to criticize the statement, that this is, from some advocates of this legislation, that this is a step in the right direction. I've not heard anyone who advocates it say this is the end of what needs to be done. If it were, we might at least have something to talk about. But I feel that if the point of this is to take at any given moment what can be taken, then to come back for what remains at another moment, then those who are being affected by it are bound to feel that way. I'd say that there's two other issues, I think, in America, one in history and one current, that are very similar that way. One was abolition, where the South was very defensive, not necessarily because of what they were defending as far as the rights to open the territories up to slavery and so forth, but the sense that any constriction of those rights put them on the way to the elimination of slavery. I think the same situation exists today with abortion. Those who defend abortion are very jealous of every kind of abortion, every situation, every restriction on abortion, because they know that once the band starts to tighten around it, that the practice, or the legality of the practice, moves in the direction of extinction. Same is the case with guns, and I think that those who are concerned are right to be concerned. In response to this situation, and in response to the fact that I think that the bill before us contains many things which are helpful, I don't think anything which is decisively helpful. I think the task forces did the best job they could in the time they had available to them. I was on the mental health task force. Senator Harp, my respect for Senator Harp over the years working with her on appropriations has risen week by week. And I thought she did an excellent job. Terry Wood, my co-ranking member on Human Services, likewise. Yet all we really could do was to identify a few things that we thought were working and put more weight behind them, and identify a few things that we thought needed to be looked at and ask that they be looked at. Nonetheless, I think a step in the right direction. The same with the school security section. And the gun safety section, I think, also has elements in it that we all agreed on. What elements of what started out to be, to my mind, a genuinely bipartisan bill, a genuinely consensus bill that could attract the votes of everyone in this chamber. Thank you, Madam President. Let me say one thing, as I promised, about the process of this. I was referring to the process of the amendment before. The process of the bill that's before us. I may be the only person that rises to say this, and I say it with all respect for the leadership we have here, which I deeply respect on both sides. But I think we made a mistake by trying to move forward with this bill the way we did. I think that we have the experience in this chamber of moving bills through a regular process, through committees, and subjecting them to normal public hearings. And I think that when we step away from that process, we are on shifting ground, and we never know how it's going to end up. In this case, I think it was done as I think almost everything here is done with the best intentions. But I feel that the intention may have been, first of all, to bring unanimity, which we will not achieve, and maybe could not achieve. And second, I think to speed the process. I think in the end, it's rather paralyzed our process here. I think that we've gone through a period of a couple of months when other business has moved forward in a desultory way. Well, the attention of the leadership was focused on reaching an agreement on these issues. I'd further say, and maybe most pointedly, that although the process lasted a number of months, it still has ended in an unseemly rush, to my mind. A final version of this bill was only in my hands this morning. The bill that we had before us yesterday afternoon was still not the final bill, and it wasn't until Monday that we really knew for sure what the outlines of that final bill were going to be. That's not time enough for us to act properly, and I'm somewhat at a loss as to why the extra days, because it would only be a matter of days and not weeks, were not granted for us to examine this bill. I'm also at a loss to understand why there was no hearing on the bill in its final form. This has been and it's something that I've brought up throughout the process. I know that it can't be guaranteed by any given party involved in it, but I think it's something that we owe to the people of Connecticut with these bills. The fact that there were hearings on the subject matter, that there were opportunities on different individual bills that were going through the process for people to testify, well, it may be better than nothing, but to my mind it's not adequate, especially for a bill of the significance of what we're voting on here today. And again, when we're talking about something that is only a matter of days or a week, I wouldn't be favoring delaying this process for a matter of months, but long enough for the people to weigh in on it. I think we do wrong when we do this, and I've seen it more times than I like since I've been back in this chamber. I'll say two final things. One is, I've had a very unusual experience in returning here after many years. And I wasn't sure how well I'd handle it. Until recently, I thought I was handling it pretty well. But I have thought to myself, why did fate desire that I should be here again at this time? And every now and then I feel like I have a message from the past to deliver. So my message from today, for those who might be weighing in their own minds how to vote on this, I was out of this chamber for 24 years fully. I won't round up. 24 years from the end of my first term to the beginning of my second term. And I didn't think about my service in this. You know, my name my name's on that plaque over there because I happened to be here when we renovated the hall. I used to drive by and think, isn't it funny I used to serve there and that my name is there, never thinking that I'd join it, I'd be reunited with my plaque. I didn't think obsessively about that term, but I thought about it from time to time. And one thing, when I thought about votes that I cast, was I thought I have never regretted doing what I thought was right, looking at it over decades. The only votes I regretted were the votes that I cast for what I thought were political reasons, because I felt pressure of one sort or another. And take that as the advice of somebody who had a long time to reflect on it. The second thing I'd say is, I said before, I don't have a passion for firearms. But for whatever reason, I have a passion for personal liberty. And I am very wary to do anything without extremely strong cause which restricts personal liberty. And I also have a passion and a deep respect that has grown throughout my life, perhaps to love for the Constitution of this country, which is really what makes us a country. We don't come from the same place. We haven't always occupied the same piece of land. We don't even necessarily share the same history. But there is one document that defines what the country is. And out of respect for that document, among other reasons, I will oppose this bill. Thank you.